This show came from Tony Shafrazi Gallery in New York, and you're seeing it almost in its entirety. Tony Shafrazi is an old established gallery in New York and deeply embedded in the fine arts world. He's something of a renegade, and he would probably have to be to have a show like this. He was instrumental in starting the graffiti artist back in the 80s. His real claim to fame was that in the 60s he went in the Metropolitan Museum of Art in New York and defaced Picasso's Guernica. When I got involved in Tony Shafrazi's gallery, I was told right off the bat, don't worry about getting in the Metropolitan Museum, that's out of the question. I come from I have a formal arts education, but I have an orthodox background in the arts. When I came into the fine arts world in 1963 as a young student, the art world was pretty much dominated with abstract expressionism. It was just an absolute form that ruled art. And I came to this world with ideas of B-movie posters and comic book art and lurid graphics and draftsmanship and craftsmanship, and I was straightened out right away that abstract expressionism was the form of art, and that I should paint from the shoulder, not the wrist, and that anything that spoke of craftsmanship indicated that I should either aim my career toward being an illustrator or try for blue ribbons at county fairs. Well, my peer group in art school were artists that practiced abstract expressionism, and I was referred to as the illustrator. And that was then, and in the fine arts world now, is a derogatory term. You refer to someone, oh, well, he is an illustrator. I was just in a show a year and a half ago at the Oakland Museum with 9 artists, and the paper there in San Francisco, the Chronicle, wrote up the show, and they praised me highly. They said that I outstripped every artist in the show, and then they ended it by saying, well, of course, he's an illustrator. So I have an attitude that all art should be free and liberal, and there should be more than one ism at a time in the art world. We're now in the period of conceptualism. We're at the very tail end of conceptualism, and it's a very dominant art form. It has its little sister, minimalism, and pop art is a cousin that's stayed along for a long time. And this show speaks of an art outside of what you'll find in art forum. I've had write-ups in art forum, and they've been so pedantic that I can't even make out what they were talking about. But in the late 60s, I got involved with Zap Comics, and I was involved with Robert Crumb and a number of very, very professional artists. And when we got together, we all realized we all went through art school, and we were all persecuted for being technically proficient. So, as I met more and more artists that had the same situation, it was obvious that there had to be a journal or a book or a magazine to encompass this group of people. So, me and a couple of friends started a magazine called Juxtapose in 1994. And Juxtapose dealt with graffiti art, realistic art, and art that wasn't held near and dear to the hearts of the art world. Now, Juxtapose magazine is the #1 selling art magazine in the world. We watched it climb past Art Forum and Art in America, and then finally Art News. And now it is the #1 selling art magazine. There was a period there when art schools wouldn't allow the magazine in their classes, but now it's hard to find a school that doesn't tolerate Juxtapose magazine. It started out as an underground publication. Now it has a life of its own. But the point I'm trying to make is the art you see here is an art that is not a well-accepted academic form of art. And probably the reason for that is because of the time and energy that goes into all this tight oil painting. It's just not practical to put this in an academic curriculum for young people. It just takes too long. Some of these paintings take almost a year, and you can't teach young art students and maintain their attention. Grueling oil painting. But nonetheless, there are enough artists in the United States and Europe and Japan that like this form of art. It's a chronic situation for me. I'm compelled to do it. I run around today with abstract expressionists that are my good friends and conceptualists, and they tolerate me, and I function in their world, and we're good buddies. And if by some uncomfortable situation developed where this become the dominant form of art, I would come to their aid and try to pull them back into the circle. I'll try to describe the paintings to you. I don't know if we can all walk around the rooms, but if you have any questions, I want to keep this as formal as possible. If you have any interest, or you have any mysteries that need to be solved about this stuff. Start with that mystery. No, that took about 10 months.
No ponytail.
Well, you know, you don't need a goatee and sandals and trail mix to be a bohemian. I'm too much so. In fact, I'm straining to keep down the profanity. I've been thrown out of schools. I've been in jail. I've been in a lot of trouble. Well, I've got to represent this stuff in the best light possible. Where was I? You want me to describe this one?
Yeah.
Well, I lived in Hollywood for a long time. Me and my wife Suzanne lived in Hollywood. And Hollywood was a town that everyone in America thought was wonderful until they got there and they said, this isn't all there is to Hollywood. Hollywood has I guess still to this day, a seamy undercurrent. A lot of licentious activity goes on in Hollywood, and an enormous drug culture. I learned while living in Hollywood, actually, the most rattiest form of culture is outside of Hollywood, in Hawthorne and Maywood, these other little towns that have wife swapping and drug sales and whatnot. But Hollywood is the most colorful place in respect to that. The thing I noticed about Hollywood was there was a continual transient bunch of people that come in trying to fulfill their dreams and found disappointment. People that come in and thought they could get into show business, and young girls that thought they could be successful overnight. And enormous amount of prostitution and drugs and crime and mugging and whatnot. And the reality about Hollywood is the big money is outside of Hollywood. It makes the movie industry. But Hollywood had lost its intensity a long time ago. And this painting here is a stylized rendition of Hollywood. And the name of this painting is Hollywood After Midnight, and it shows the demonic face that I purposely twisted so that you have trouble in your mind straightening it out. So I did a bunch of sketches and worked on something that was altered. So when you look at it, and it was designed to see from an enormous distance, your mind is immediately trying to make it work. And to set that into contrast, I put a much more formal form of dial below down here. So you have this working dichotomy here. And then further over to the left, I've got Beelzebub on the stage there as a formal devil. 1700s costume, late Shakespearean devil, with his head distended over his shoulders and coming back to the hole. Now,